Scalia, whenever you're ready.
I'm sorry. Today's meeting of the Neighborhood and Affordable Housing Advisory Board is called to order on December 10th, 2019. Welcome to everyone. Agendas of today's meeting are on the wall at the entrance to chambers. Please remember to turn off your cell phones. To ensure a complete record of the board's actions, we ask that each individual wishing to speak clearly state your name and spell your last name for the clerk. Will board members please introduce yourselves and state the field you represent?
I'll start. Camille Hepting. I'm with Clearwater Ferry Services, and I represent the employers in the city of Clearwater.
Kevin Chenault, representing the nonprofit industry.
Peggy Cudcup, representing real estate.
Pete Scalia, representing the homeless and low-income people.
Linda Kemp, mortgage banking.
Carmen Santiago, representing the people.
Item 2 is the approval of our minutes. Our first order of business is to review and approve the minutes of the board's July 9th, 2019 meeting. May I have a motion of approval?
I make a motion that we approve the minutes from the last meeting. Which one it was?
That was from July 9th.
From July 19th.
A second?
I'll second.
Discussion?
I think it's July 9th.
July 9th.
July 9th, 2019.
I do have a question. In the director's report, there was a note that Ms. Anderson was going to share a study with us as soon as it was completed. Was that completed, or is that something that we're still waiting on?
Forgive me.
The HDR housing study?
You know what? I have not received a final draft of that yet. And when I do receive it, I will forward that to you all.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments about the minutes? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The minutes are approved. Next item on the agenda is citizens to be heard regarding items not on the agenda. Is there anyone here to speak to items not on today's agenda? Okay. There's no one step forward. Seeing that no one has come forward, we will move on to the next item. Item 4.1, recommend the City Council approval of the City of Clearwater's fiscal year 2018-2019 Consolidated Annual Performance and Evaluation Report. Mr. Lane.
Thank you. Chuck Lane, Assistant Director, Economic Development and Housing Department. I want to thank you for taking the time to be here today. More importantly, I want to thank you for your service on this board and service to our residents. I'm going to use a PowerPoint today to present the Housing Division's Consolidated Annual Performance and Evaluation Report. Of course, in government, we need an acronym, so we call it the CAPER. On December 31st of each year, the city is required to submit the CAPER to HUD, of course, the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development. The report outlines the city's programs and provides an accounting of all the activities undertaken by the city and its subrecipient organizations. This is, of course, a report of the use of community development block grant funding and home investment partnership program funding. So while this is a report of our use of federal funds, the report also briefly summarizes our expenditures and our accomplishments with State Housing Initiatives Partnership Program and Pinellas County Housing Trust Fund program funds. My presentation will go into the state and local expenditures a little bit more than the report does, because I want to take this opportunity to give the board a full view of the accomplishments we've made throughout the year. So the resources and expenditures for the federal programs include entitlement from CDBG and home. Entitlement funds are formula-driven amounts that are provided directly from HUD to entitlement communities like Clearwater. The entitlement numbers have remained steady over the last several years, which is an accomplishment given the political environment. The city received nearly $741,000 in CDBG and $383,000 in home funding in fiscal year 18-19. We carried over nearly $1.4 million in prior year funds. This number also includes funds remaining from projects that were either canceled or withdrawn by the applicant during the course of the year. We received approximately $131,000 in program income. This is primarily generated from the home program through loans made to homeowners, nonprofit agencies, and developers. We also have a revolving loan fund that we're able to use for housing and economic development activities. The city expended approximately $1.4 million of these available funds, leaving a balance of just over $2.4 million. Most of the fund balance is home money. We have some multifamily projects that are in the planning stages right now. I'll go into them a little bit later in the meeting, and that should really cut into a lot of the remaining funds that we have over the next year or two. So aside from the federal funds, the city also expended more than $930,000 in State Housing Initiative Partnership Program money and Pinellas County Housing Trust funds. As we've done for the last several years, we also provided a total of $235,000 in general funds to 6 partners throughout the city, or actually throughout the county, that help us carry out our homeless initiative. So when we use home funds on a housing project, we're required to provide a 25% non-federal match. We use SHIP and county trust fund money for this match most of the time. In 1819, our match requirement was $178,000. I should note that we can also build a banked match from our partner activities. For example, construction material costs, the cash equivalent of volunteer hours on a single-family home project. We can take those dollars and bank it and use it for a future match on a home project. And we do that to the extent we can. All of the funds we put towards housing are intended to leverage other funds. And you can see it on the slide. Our expenditures with federal funds alone leverage nearly $770,000 in private investment. So our community development and housing programs are all about providing assistance to people and households. This slide gives you an idea where we get really the most bang for our buck. Our partnerships with public service providers certainly cast the largest net. Next fiscal year, we'll be trying to expand our economic development program. And with some new multifamily projects coming forward, as I said earlier, the number of households assisted through our housing program should increase a bit. Like I said, I'll go into a bit more detail on those projects later on in the agenda. And this slide shows you the number of people and households we assisted with our state and local funds. So as you all know, when we talk about it regularly at these meetings, we couldn't serve the number of people we serve without partnerships. It really is the core of what we do, certainly on the community development side. These are our public service partners. They play a vital role in assisting and carrying out the programs and providing service to our residents. RCS Pinellas provides a range of services in Clearwater, domestic violence, homelessness. They're getting into the affordable housing arena as well. Homeless Emergency Project, also known as Homeless Empowerment Program. They've been a valuable city partner for many years on the homeless side. They too are getting into the affordable housing arena shortly. West Care Gulf Coast provides substance abuse services. Pinellas Opportunity Council's Shore Services Program. They primarily help elderly folks that are no longer able to care for their home. Pinellas County Opportunity Council, I just went over that. Intercultural Advocacy Institute, also known as Hispanic Outreach Center. They provide youth programs and intensive family support. Gulf Coast Legal Services, they represent tenants facing fair housing issues. Many of these organizations have become staples in our community and are regularly subrecipients in our program. We fund homebuyer education at the cost of $70 per class per person. Clearwater Neighborhood Housing Services and Tampa Bay Community Development Corporation, they're HUD qualified to provide these services, and they've done so in Clearwater for several years now for us. Housing and Education Alliance, they're also qualified, and they joined us this year as well. So these are our partners with microenterprise and public facility programs. Tampa Bay Black Business Investment Corporation and Prospera provided technical assistance to business owners and hopeful entrepreneurs. We use CDBG funds to fund a facility improvement at our club on Whitney Road. We funded an HVAC replacement at St. Vincent de Paul Community Kitchen and Resource Center. They're making some very strong progress right now with their job training program. We began a solar installation project which was completed in the current fiscal year for the Arc of Tampa Bay. They have a group home in Clearwater. On the following slides, I have some pictures of projects we funded with Directions for Living and HEP. So this is at Directions for Living's main facility. We took what was really an underutilized storage area and created a training center, conference room. It's really a terrific improvement. It's utilized just about every day there. And this is Batty Villas. This is something the county also contributed on this project along with us. It's a 16-unit permanent supportive housing project. So we funded the rehabilitation of this facility, very successful. These are our housing partners. Southport Financial Services developed Woodlawn Trail, an 80-unit project in our Lake Bellevue neighborhood. Madison Point is an 80-unit project in our downtown. It's on South MLK. It's a senior project for folks 55 and over. Both of these projects total 160 units, all affordable housing, leased up within the last couple of months. Good projects. Community Service Foundation leased up 7 units in the Lake Bellevue neighborhood, a project known as Teeman Village. This is a housing project where they provide low-cost housing to non-traditional households. It's primarily geared towards trying to get people off the street. Unsheltered people housed is really what it comes down to. So far, they've been successful in housing 19 people. They're trying to duplicate this effort elsewhere in the city and in the county. This is 2 pictures of 2 homes side by side, Habitat for Humanity on North Garden. We completed earlier this year, 1209 and 1211 North Garden. This is about half mile up, maybe a quarter mile up the road from the 12 units we completed in the prior year. And we have some projects that we started this fiscal year, and hopefully we'll complete it this fiscal year. And maybe some will last a little bit longer. 5 single-family homes are either under construction or awaiting construction. All are with Habitat for Humanity. I'll talk about a little bit later today about, I'm going to council later this month to donate 3 more single-family home lots for 3 new homes, 2 of them Habitat. See, we have 4 home rehabilitations that are in process right now. And we're also in the planning stages, as you can see those check marks, of some exciting multifamily projects. Planning stages, I'm confident that at some point we'll get to fruition with these, but these will take some time. And I'll talk about each of those a little bit later on in the agenda. So HUD requires a 15-day public comment period for the CAPER. Prior to submitting it, and it's due by 12/31. The public comment period began on December 5th and concludes on December 19th. So we are in that public comment period now. Also on December 19th, I will present the CAPER to City Council. The CAPER document will be considered a draft until the public comment period is over and Council has approved. So anyone wishing to review the document, it's available at myclearwater.com. /affordable housing. A hard copy is also available for viewing at the Housing Division at 600 Cleveland Street on the 6th floor. So that concludes my presentation, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
Are there any questions or comments from the board? I actually have one question before you check in. When I was going through this report, there was, looking at the planned percentage of allocation versus the actual percentage of allocation, it looked like something was planned for Lake Bellevue, but then it may have fallen through, and then something that wasn't planned was developed in North Greenwood. Am I correct reading it that way?
I'm not looking at it right now.
Do you happen to know what page, Pete?
Yeah, it's page 10 on the report.
Thank you.
I can give you a general overview of planned versus accomplished. What happens when we create our CAPER? It goes back to our consolidated plan, and it grabs all the information on what we planned with that document. And I think, in hindsight, I think we could have done a little bit of a better job with that consolidated plan that was done 4 years ago, and really aligning those goals and objectives with what the outcomes are intended to be. Because in some areas you'll see we accomplished far more than was planned, far less than was planned, and it's really a function of that consolidated plan. Could have been maybe a touch higher quality. We're going through the consolidated plan process beginning this month, later this month. We're going to roll through that, and we're going to really pay attention to what those planned goals are. and make sure that when we do produce this CAPER in years forward, that it is much more accurate and much more aligned, where the goals are much more aligned with really what our intended outcomes are. But specifically, do you see anything specific, Denise?
No, the table that Pete is referring to is Table 4, and it has a planned percentage of allocation citywide of 58%, 2% in Gateway, 39% in Lake Bellevue, and 1% in North Greenwood. And the actual percentage of allocation in that same order is 60% citywide, 3% Gateway, 0 in Lake Bellevue, and 37% in North Greenwood. So I think what happens, this is a 4-year consolidated plan attached to a 1-year annual action plan. And so when we create the consolidated plan, and going forward, it is a 5-year consolidated plan. The last one was 4 years to align with the county's planning process. When we create the plan 4 years ago, it's wild guesses based on
No,
some
I get it.
experiences.
That makes absolute sense.
And then as we go through the annual planning process, we look at what projects we believe may be coming down the pike. And so it's quite possible that
And deals
projects
fall
simply fall
through
through.
and plans change.
Yeah.
That's really all I was thinking, because the allocation was, the planned allocation was 58%, and we managed to do 60%. So I'm sure,
Yeah.
we did what we wanted to do. I just didn't know if there was one particular reason where maybe we had planned a unit and that deal fell through, and so we just said, now let's do it over here. That's all.
I'm guessing we had put out to bid property on South MLK, Chuck, that we did not get great bid response, and so we pulled that back.
And then went to
And
something
so
else.
it's quite likely when we created the annual action plan, it was with that project in mind and just simply never came to
Terrific.
fruition.
Thank you. Anybody else have any other questions?
Yes, I do have a question about Table 3 that's just before. It shows all of the resources made available and then the amount that was actually used. And my question is, are we using all of the monies that we're entitled to? And is the difference shown here monies that we're not using or monies that we're keeping for next year, or how does that work?
So the federal government, particularly on the CDBG side, they're very prescriptive with what you should be spending. There's a timeliness calculation we need to do every year, and we meet that every year, and we have done that. CDBG, we generally spend most of what we get. The home money is a little bit different. The home is a smaller allocation, $383,000 this report year. But what we have with home is a lot of program income. And when we have a match, as I mentioned earlier in my presentation, when we match, say, SHIP with home, when that money comes back in, it all comes, when it's repaid, because they're loans, it all comes back in as home. So home tends to grow, okay? So we have more of a balance with home funding. And the balance is high now, and that creates opportunities for us, because we can now facilitate some larger projects. And I won't be able to do that every year, because the balance ebbs and flows. But I think we do a good job getting that money out the door. We're a little light with home this year. I think, and again, that's going to create opportunities for us with some of the projects we have coming up. We don't spend all the money. If we do, we're not able to fund projects that come in. We do what we can, and we partner with developers to the extent we can. I think we do a good job with it. We're working on the multifamily rental is really what we're trying to pull together right now. We're able to help a lot more people. You can see Woodlawn Trail, Madison Point, right there, 160 people. You don't achieve that with the one-off single-family homes, although they're great. And our partnership with Habitat for Humanity is terrific, and we want to create home ownership. So we really do want both sides of that aisle. We want to facilitate home ownership projects and rental projects. So it's about, it's a matter of working with our developers and what their temperature is for the level of investment they want to bring. Affordable housing requires a subsidy, just by definition, and that's what we're here to do. That's what these programs do.
So any of the monies that were not spent are still being used by the department to do more projects in the future?
They're still available, yes.
Are there any other questions from the board? Are there any questions from anyone in the audience?
Are you going to go through page by page, or is it just one?
And if you could reference the page.
Yep, I sure will.
Could you state your name, please?
Sure, Kathleen Beckman. So, if we look at page 1, so we've got some of these objectives and outcomes. So the goal was to have 87 households served. 57 households will have new or improved access, and 19 households, and then 30 households will have access to affordable housing. So the goal was 87 and 19 were served. And I'm not gonna, I don't want to appear to be antagonistic or anything, I just want to understand. So that's a huge difference between the goal and the 19 that were served. And then I'd like to understand under these objectives, how do you come up with the number that's the goal? How do you come up with 57 households here, 30 here, 480 individuals will have access for objective 2? It's like, where do those numbers come from?
Those numbers are created with our comp plan, our consolidated plan, which is right now we're working on a 4-year consolidated plan. It's a long-range plan. Typically, it's a 5-year plan. So that's where the numbers come from. So 87 and 19 served. What we did is we would have met that, actually. We really did meet that on the SHIP side. We served, over 170, 180, I can't remember what the number is, with Woodlawn Trail and with some other SHIP projects. So we get to the number that, like I said in my presentation, the consolidated plan, it's a long-range plan, and it's difficult really to pinpoint exactly what we're going to achieve every year. We did 160 units with SHIP with those 2 programs. That may not happen next year. We may do more on the home side.
Yeah.
I think by and large, I think we had good results with the program across the board with all of the funding sources that we have.
It's quite often, Ms. Beckman, that when we get into a program year, we have deadlines with SHIP, we have deadlines with federal funds, and so there are times when we need to choose the funding source in order to meet deadline qualifications. And so it's quite possible that the SHIP funds were chosen for these projects because we had a pending deadline with SHIP and we had funding availability. And so sometimes we're chasing our tails a little bit in order to meet compliance. And so the challenge here is because this is a federal report, you don't have the benefit of the state companion piece that gets submitted in August every year. So as Chuck said, we were able to meet the objectives of the department as a whole. We were over goal on SHIP perhaps this year. But it doesn't reflect properly here. So as Chuck said, when you see 19 households were served, those are for completed projects. There are projects that we are working on that Chuck's going to speak to a little bit in his director's report that kind of gives an indication of where those additional projects are for next fiscal year.
Okay.
There was an application withdrawn this year, too, for Woodlawn Trail. That we were going to use CDBG money in addition to the SHIP.
Okay.
That would have shifted that accomplishment to the federal side.
I'm not going to pretend I understand all that patchwork.
Okay.
Yeah, that's quite all right.
I'm going to nod, but the question was more like, all right, so when we set that number of 30 and 50, and there was like a number, I think somewhere in here I've annotated about 2 people with specific disabilities or something. And so it's like, wow, that's the goal, is to serve 2 or something. But I'm just, like, do you have if we have a number of homeless or people struggling with affordable housing at, let's say, I'm going to make it up, 3,000, is that then how you come up with a goal of 80 and whatever? Or that's what I want to understand, is how did these goal numbers originate?
And it is originated when we create our consolidated plan, and that's done through an analysis and pulling statistics of what's out there, what's needed. That's an analysis.
For our municipality?
Our
Yes.
community.
How many homeless disabled, how many homeless
Yep.
single mothers, whatever?
We-
And then you pull out what you think is doable with our budget, or?
Yeah, so if I can address this. So in 2016-17, I believe it, or 15-16, forgive me, I don't recall the origination date of the consolidated plan that we're in. This is the last year of that 4-year plan. And so when that data was pulled in the housing needs assessment, the federal government establishes certain goals, and we look at the data for all of these stated federal objectives. And unfortunately, that data is aged because of nature of data. So they pull it from the 5-year ACS, American Community Survey, which is a part of the census. And so we get aged data, unfortunately, so I can't promise you that it's accurate data, but over time, the trends are obviously show themselves. So we're working off of 15, 16 data that was available at that time. This year, you'll see when we bring the consolidated planning process forward for approval in July, you'll see that as well, that though it's old data, we have to use that for the next 5 years. And so it's a bit of a challenge because of the way that the federal government regulates the process. That said, obviously, we're here to respond to the needs as they arise and utilize the funds in compliance with the regulations that are in place.
Okay, all right. And then I just, on page 1, we have 6,008 individuals served, and that's laudable. I think that's good, but it includes all sorts of things like, food bank services, expansion, improvement of public parks and all that stuff. And I think, I'm wondering exactly how is that measured? And then, yeah, I mean, if we go to page 6, how are, the goal is prevention and reduction of homelessness. This is kind of in the middle. And I'm wondering, how are we preventing it? That was kind of a question. And then the second goal, expanding accessibility and coordination with, to services to people with special needs. Again, some of those details. And then, this is just kind of a data report question. On page 8, why is the total 6,129, and then we have a delineation of Hispanic and non-Hispanic? Why is there a total, and then why is Hispanic and non-Hispanic pulled out like that?
When we partner with these public service providers, we require them monthly to give us reports of the number of people they serve. And part of what they need to report, because of HUD requirements, is race.
Okay,
So they do that in the 5 or 6 rows above. Down below, Hispanic, non-Hispanic, that's not a race.
okay,
So,
It's an ethnic.
okay,
so there's so many white people, that so many of them are Hispanic, so many of them are not.
okay. So that's why that's, all right.
But backing up to your previous questions in
About
that.
those objectives? Yeah.
So the persons served in some of those goals, CDBG is the only funding source of these 2 federal sources, CDBG and HOME, that can be used for public service activities or public facility activities. The public services activities, the federal government establishes a 15% cap on our allocation, so that $743,000, only about $110,000 can be used for public service projects, and that's done through the competitive grant application project a process that kicks off in late January. So I think we had 26 organizations, nonprofit organizations that applied for public service dollars, and they received small grants through that process. So we just kicked off that funding cycle for October 1. We are now paying for those grants that we awarded last summer following that process. So you'll see the persons served by those public service agencies. So recall, we're not directly serving through public service.
Can you
So
give me one example of like a public service project? What would fall under that category?
Salvation Army is often one of those applicants.
St. Vincent?
St. Vincent de Paul is one of those. HEP is one of those. Pinellas Opportunity Council. So those are what you see reflected in that, or the result of public service activities.
Okay.
We are also able to fund public facilities through a non-competitive process, because that is not given a cap. The only limitation there is the funding available in the entitlement program. So we also provide grants to nonprofit organizations for public facilities improvements. So you saw in the presentation Directions for Living as an example, we made some improvements to that facility through that program.
So it's not specific housing, but it is services for people who.
Right, and those organizations, we solicit applications, sometimes in a competitive process, and we have an open call for applications in public facilities. So it really is dependent upon those organizations to apply.
Okay. And then it looks like, because this is a draft, on page 11, there's some, data that needs to be filled in there, right? So this was that, I think,
We have, you probably pulled this draft off of the agenda.
yes,
If you go to our website, that is. where-
updated now?
That's
Oh,
updated now.
okay.
We'll get this updated too for the record. but
Okay.
it's Probably the better resource.
Okay. And then the no housing activities were completed or expected to be completed in the East Gateway Neighborhood Revitalization Strategy area, right?
That is correct.
Okay. On page 12, the middle-ish paragraph, the fiscal year 2018-19, is that the Sadowski funds, that their completed federal funding activities leveraged 178,101 in state local funds? Is that money from Sadowski?
In part, that is the SHIP funds, which gets their allocation from the Sadowski.
Okay.
And Pinellas County Housing Trust Fund.
So they're grouped together in that?
They are in this report,
Okay.
yep.
Okay. And then are the things completed on page 14 and, 'cause if I pulled mine off early, or 14, 15, yeah. Yeah. I have a bunch of zeros on 14 and 15.
Minority business, and
Yeah, all
that
that
is
stuff.
correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. I thought one of the key statements was on page 18, and it's the last little paragraph. It said, "The city of Clearwater is a built-out community and lacks developable land for construction of new affordable owner-occupied and rental housing. These barriers continue to have a negative impact on projects and programs." So the question is, what do we do?
It's a great question. So one of the recommendations that we made to the Charter Review Committee, currently, we can donate acreage up to a half an acre. We're limited to that cap. When we donate land, that puts equity into the project immediately. Going forward, should council approve the recommendation of the Charter Review Committee, we'll have a cap of 5 acres. That will help us certainly. It doesn't, yeah. So, yes, thank you. So it will continue to be a challenge. We don't have greenfield all over, and because we don't have greenfield, the cost of development is more expensive. Demolition, environmental remediation, and other adds to cost.
Because we have more brownfield than,
In part, or perceived brownfield, so there's always testing that's required, things of that nature, or asbestos in an existing structure as an example, which by the way is not considered a brownfield, but does require remediation, things like that. So those costs of development are increased naturally because of the nature of the community.
From a real estate perspective too, when you have land that's improved, even if it's improved with a dated structure, an appraiser will apply value to that structure. So it's more expensive than if that land were vacant. And it's ironic because the developer needs to now go in and tear that down at an additional cost, pay more for the land, then tear it down to make it vacant before they can build. It's difficult. Now, the county is, with Penny 4, is putting in a lot of money that can be used for land acquisition. So that can kind of be offset by the penny. And then we can come in on the backside and help with some construction costs. So us partnering with the county is going to be huge for us in the next decade.
the other key paragraph, I think, was on page 18 as well, right above that, and that's the cost burden. So when I added up those numbers, it's like 27,000 people in the city. 16,000 plus renters have excessive cost burden for their rent, and 11,000 plus homeowners have excessive cost burden for their mortgage. So we have at least 27,000 people in the city that are struggling with housing, not counting the people that aren't even, the people that are homeless, right?
Correct, and actually, the Alice report, which is published by the United Way on a going forward basis, hopefully annual, although they have not been able to produce it annually. That Alice report shows that the city of Clearwater has 49% of the households in the city of Clearwater are in fact cost burden or in the poverty level. So the Alice report stands for, it's effectively our working poor. It's the asset limited income constrained employed workers who struggle on a daily basis with their expenses. And so it is viewed that they are have difficulty with an emergency greater than $400 in meeting their financial obligations, and so they are considered at risk. So countywide, that number is 46%.
So we're higher than the county.
A little bit. Yes, we are.
The paragraph you referenced referred to households, not people, so it's more than 27,000 people.
Okay, that's a good thing, yeah, nice to know. Mhm.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
The paragraph that she referenced refers to households, not
Not just people, so it's more than 27,000 people. Wow, right. Okay, on page 19, I like, the mission is very noble up there. Homelessness should be rare, brief, and one time. On page 19, the second paragraph from the bottom, we have one case manager, correct, for the whole city, that it helps identify people that need help, right? The Clearwater Homeless Street Outreach Team, I think we have one person.
That is funded through, Chuck mentioned the $235,000 citywide homeless initiative. I believe those dollars. It's from those dollars in part that we pay for a case manager through Directions for Living. That certainly does not mean that we have only one case manager working within the city of Clearwater. It means that we have one case manager who is part of the street outreach team,
Okay,
who is meeting with persons who are living on the street.
okay.
And that person is not an employee of the city of Clearwater, it's simply funded by.
Okay, and then the paragraph right above that, is it the city's policy that we should not be feeding homeless? Because,
It is the city's policy that a hand up, not a hand out, and so we support those organizations that provide not only food, but shelter and other case management and wraparound services. That indeed is the city's policy.
I just made a note that I think on page 20 and 21, the articulation of how much money went to what, addressing the emergency shelter and transitional housing needs, and then on the other page, helping homeless persons, especially chronically, blah, blah, blah. All that is the same numbers, it's just the same as page 20.
The
You've kind of
report-
lumped them in together with all, right? I mean, it's,
Or it gets redundant.
yeah. Just, I I think that's it for right now. I mean, it's such a significant problem, I mean, and it's intricate, and I know it's a patchwork of services and matching funds and all that, but the reality is, the number that you said, 49% is unacceptable. And it's such a challenge to try to deal with it. So it'd be nice to come up with creative solutions, Okay, thank you.
Great questions,
Thank you.
thank you.
Anybody else in the audience have a question? May I have a motion to approve the report?
So,
Oh, go ahead.
And a second?
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Item number 5, does the board have any old or new business to discuss? Nothing? Okay.
I have a note, actually, and you just need to find it. There was a public comment at our last meeting that Kim was gonna look into restrictions, is my note here. There was a question about using some of the monies to, towards organizations that are helping residents lower their utility bill by using energy efficiency, like changing to more energy efficient appliances or whatever else. And there was a comment that was made that Kim was gonna look through some of the restrictions of the, I believe, HUD funds. So I just wanted to follow up on that.
So we do, with our home rehab program, we are, if we were able to replace some of these appliances, and we're required to replace them at an Energy Star level, there are requirements in there. So we are able to do it.
Okay.
We don't do it solely, we don't go in and have a project where we just replace a water heater to make it more efficient. It could be part of a larger rehab project.
Okay.
Does anyone else have any other comments? The audience, the board? Mr. Lane, do you have anything to report?
Yes. So, running a little bit long, but I do want to update the board on some things. And, it's been a while since we last met. One of our board members sent an email to us, to Denise and me, with a concern about the frequency of the meetings. And we all know that what we do is very important to our community. We have direction from our city clerk to have meetings when they are required, when you have to take action on an item. Now, if the board chooses to do something differently, we can make that pitch to our city clerk. We haven't met since July. The next 2 months, we may or may not meet, January and February. Beginning in March, we will meet 5 consecutive months. So we're not going to run into that problem for a while. When we approach the end of that stretch, maybe we'll have a discussion about whether or not the board wants more frequent meetings to be involved. You're going to see a project that we went to council with today, an affordable housing project that was approved by council that you had no input on. And I don't like that. I really don't. So I think we'll have that discussion at a later time when we get to a point where we think there's going to be a lull in the meetings. And typically the fall is when that happens. So stay tuned on that. A lot has happened since our last meeting. We had a retirement. Kim DuPont has left us. Irene Gomez has taken on a lot of her responsibilities. Irene is in the audience today. Irene had a heavy hand in creating this caper, so congratulations to her for the work she's done. Drinking through a fire hose is pretty much what Irene's doing right now, and she's doing real well. So to go over some of these projects that I'm talking about, we talked about Madison Point Woodlawn Trail. Woodlawn Trail, there is a ribbon cutting coming up. I sent you all the invitation. It is 11 a.m. on Tuesday, December 17th. So hoping y'all can attend that. I think it's great to see what they produce. It's a beautiful complex. It's very impressive. And hope you can all be there. All right, let's get into some of these projects. So I mentioned in my presentation that there are 3 properties that we'll be going to council with and asking to donate these properties. This is 912 Nicholson Street.
Pat, would you mind putting that up on the display?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Back down.
It's not real zoomed out, but
Are you on the podium? Are you on, okay.
yeah, I have a. Okay, you can see to the right of that parcel, that's the North Greenwood Recreation Center, to give you an idea where we are. That's a parcel that we're looking to donate to Emerge Community and Economic Development Corporation. They're a new organization we're working with. They're going to build a home for the income level at 120% of area median income and below. They have a buyer that's ready to go. So that's exciting for us. There are 2 properties on LaSalle Street. This is a little bit north of that. MLK is right here. Pennsylvania is right here. Let me zoom out a little bit. And this lot here is the other one. So it's 1002 LaSalle and 1011 LaSalle right here. This one's got some issues. It's zoned commercial, so that may or may not materialize. But this block here between MLK and Pennsylvania, it's one of the tougher blocks we have in the neighborhood. A lot of vagrancy, and I think 2 new homes will really make a difference. So hoping we can pull that off. So that's exciting. So I mentioned we went to council recently. So about 4 or 5 years ago, we moved Fire Station 45, our downtown fire station, to a new location. So the old fire station still sits with the aging structure on it, and it's in our downtown. So our CRA looked to attract an adaptive reuse project. To use that structure, fix it up, maybe it could be a restaurant or a brew pub or something that would create some vibrancy in the downtown. So we put out a call for letters of interest, and we got one. It was from the Church of Scientology. Really, their objective with the property didn't really align with our goals, so we rejected the letter. So the property sits, and so what we decided was really to get the scale of development we wanted would really need to be a subsidized project, because what you have on two sides, you have a parking garage on each side. The police station is adjacent to it, and then there's another institutional use, Church of Scientology, on the other side. So it's not an attractive property for redevelopment. So we decided to try to attract a tax credit project. So the 9%, the tax credit project, it's just what it is you apply through the state for federal tax credits, and then you sell those credits, and those credits are used as capital for your project. So you reduce your capital costs, you can translate that into lower operational costs, so that project can sustain over the long term with lower rents. That's the concept. So this went through the 9% round. Now, I know that doesn't mean anything to you, but I'll tell you what it does mean. It means this project is about a $22 million project, total development cost. The tax credits gained through this program, it will raise about $17 million in equity. There's a lot of money that goes into these projects. The 9% round is a highly competitive round. What typically happens, someone will get the credits. The developer that finished second will litigate and challenge the application that won, that it was insufficient. And if that gets kicked out, the project falls in their lap. That's how we got Madison Point in a 9% round. So the way it used to work, local governments, they're required to get local government support. And we would do that by a minimum contribution of $75,000 towards the project. Okay? So what would happen is everybody would get $75,000, all of the projects would max out on scoring, and then it's picking it out of a hat, because there's only one project that gets approved each year. So it becomes a lottery. So what the state decided to do is put the onus on local government and said, okay, if you really want a project, you can put more money in. You can give what's called the area of opportunity funding. So a project like this, it's about $740,000, $747 to be exact. So we decided that we would support that, split it with housing funds, home money, and CRA funds. So we put out an RFP, and we had 3 respondents, and this is the winning proposal. It's a 9-story high-rise. Blue Sky Communities is the applicant. So right now, they have an application in with the state. We should know for sure probably March or April if that is a successful application. 81 units, all affordable, ranging from 80% area median income to below 30% of area median income. And as you can see, it'll be one of the more attractive buildings in downtown if we're able to pull it off. They really came through with what I thought was an outstanding proposal. So.
Importantly, there were 2 projects in Pinellas County that were approved, one in St. Pete and the one in Clearwater. Both of those applications go to the state. Only one in Pinellas County can be selected. So even with a great application and a $747,000 commitment of funding, there is certainly no guarantee that this project will be selected, and if selected, litigated. So there's a long way to go. The $747,000 commitment that we did make is in the form of a loan, if I'm not mistaken.
Interest-bearing loan.
Interest-bearing loan, so that repayment of funds, half of which will come back to the housing division, will go into a revolving loan fund or program income for use out in the community again. So I just wanted to put that out there.
What is the address of that?
610 Franklin Street. Actually has frontage on Franklin Street and Pierce Street.
Okay.
And what they did with their proposal is on the Pierce Street side, which is, of course, the back of, it's the back, although there's 2 fronts, they have their parking structure, but they're going to wrap their parking structure with retail space,
Okay.
which was no other applicant suggested that. We really like that idea. Parking garages are ugly. You want to wrap them, and if you have retail space, that's even better. It's a mixed-use project.
It's also a family affordable project. That's senior.
So in case it falls through, would that be the type of project that we would still be looking for that space?
The contract we have with them allows us it gives us the unilateral discretion to extend that contract for another year for next year's round. Now, the state could come with different requirements, so it could change things, but But yeah, if we don't get it this year, we will certainly consider doing it again. And, you know, if we don't get it, maybe if something else comes up that's just as exciting for that site, we'll consider that as well.
Is there anything that we can do to help?
Unfortunately, no. It's, at this point, it's in the state's hands.
Okay.
Yeah, it's really a 50-50 shot at this point. And so to give you a little bit of this is tax credit 101, I guess. This is Union Trail. It's a proposal for the 4% tax credit round. Now, what that means is it's about $6 million in equity raised to sell tax credits. In this round, they combined it with sale money, which is state apartment incentive program. It's a loan program. So we have an application that we've accepted. We supported it with a minimum government contribution of $75,000. This will very likely, because it's less competitive, this will very likely get approved. It is on Union Street, just east of Highland. It's about a 7-acre tract. The developer here is the same developer that put together Woodlawn Trail and Garden Trail. Very good developer. It's going to be garden style, going to be 80 units. 60% and below, I believe, of area median income. So
Family affordable as well, correct?
family affordable, yes. So we're excited about this. And
And how many units did you say that was going to be?
80. 80. I have some pictures. I don't know how well it'll come out on this. But let me go through this first. So I think we discussed this briefly at one of our meetings. The HEP has their campus up in the Betty Lane area, Palmetto Street area. And right next to their campus, just west of their campus, the school board owns pretty much a super block, a real large-sized block, most of the block. And on the south side of the block, they have a school that is functioning, and on the north side of the block, they have a school that's been shut down. And what you see outlined is that school that's been shut down. So what they're doing is they're partnering with the school board is going to lease them the property, a long-term ground lease. And HEP is going to construct an affordable housing project, about 40 units. So it gets them into another segment of housing. Right now, they're at the homeless level, and they really service all levels of homeless. And affordable housing will give them the next step, their clients the next step onto self-sufficiency. And so what you see there in the north, we own that piece to the north next to the tennis courts. It's about 1.3 acres. School board portion is about 2 acres. And we plan to donate that property to the school board so they can in turn lease it to HEP for this project. So it's a really exciting kind of integrated partnership where HEP, where the school board will have education classes and job training classes for the folks that are being served at HEP. And really the concept is these folks will become trained to eventually get a job with the school board or with the city or with a hospital. The school board has a need for these non-educational type positions. And this is really a partnership that helps them get there. So it's really exciting. It's going a little bit slow, but I'm very confident this one will reach the finish line within the next probably 2 years.
If I may expand on that a little bit, Chuck, the school board has also committed to increasing the hours of availability for children in our club daycare program. Additionally, to allow for training of adults to occur. So they're going to expand the hours in which childcare is provided. They're going to be providing with HEP, in collaboration with HEP, training of these individuals for jobs in demand at the school board and in local government. So things like facilities maintenance and things of that nature. So this really is a true partnership. It's not just about land and construction of affordable housing. I'll note that we're able to donate this property to the school board, not subject to the half-acre requirement, now 5-acre requirement, but because it's another governmental entity, under our charter, we're able to make those interlocal agreements, non-bid agreements for land donation.
Do you want to put something on the envelope?
Will the ELMA work?
Is it on?
Power's on, yeah. Maybe easiest if I do this.
Is the light on?
No, it's not.
Oh, okay. Is that-
Do you want to put it on the camera over here, Chuck?
Yeah, maybe that'll work.
Is that easier for you, Pat, if we put it on the camera?
Yeah, I don't know why I don't think the light's on.
Oh.
Maybe we'll put it on that side. Let me get it on here.
This is not a real good picture of the site. I'm going to talk to you about two CRA sites that we're working with potential developers on mixed income projects where we have some market rate and then different levels of affordable housing. So this is, of course, downtown Clearwater. In the foreground, this is about a 3 1/4 acre site, maybe 3 1/2 acre site that we're working with some folks on. We're going to put out, we already put out an RFP on it, didn't get any responses. We're working directly with at least one developer that we know we believe will put in a sufficient application. So it's exciting. This project is going to be, I think, in the neighborhood of 150 units. It will be mixed income. It'll be a scale of folks at households at 120% of area median income and down below. And then there'll be so many at 80% and below, and 50 and 30. So it's an exciting project. We're looking at structured parking, high density, really exciting project.
Is that on MLK? It looks like it.
It is, and directly across from that, the other vacant piece that you see there, next to it is the Madison Point project that recently completed. And then, of course, you see the Nolan right there under the downtown Clearwater text.
So this is another site in the CRA. This is in the 1200 block of Cleveland Street. So we own, it's CRA owned. Virtually the entire block, except for these two homes here, are privately owned. They remain privately owned. It's possible that they could be acquired. It's not necessary for the project. We own the remaining lots on this side. Now, down in here, there is a community garden. We have a lease for an organization that manages a community garden. It's been very successful. So what our CRA director has envisioned for this property is to kind of expand the use of that community garden and incorporate it into a development project, kind of an urban farm, and have that intertwined with that. So it's not a garden over here and a development project here. It's commingled. So we're talking with some folks about that project, and that would also be a mixed income project. So that's very exciting as well. What other projects? Okay. I think that covers pretty much what I wanted to go over with you in terms of the exciting projects that are coming up. We always have our ears open, and these relationships we build with developers are very critical. Anybody have any questions about any of these projects or anything I've discussed during this segment of the agenda? Okay. Again, thank you for your service to the board. Very much
Sorry
appreciated.
that the audience has a question. Audience member has a question.
You need to approach the dais, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lane.
Thank you.
My name is Lisa Linangi. That's Liinangi. I've been homeless for 2 years. I've been living in Clearwater since 1986. And I'm wondering, the property at 610 Franklin specifically, will that be done through the housing authority for the residents?
No, it will not be done through the Clearwater Housing Authority or Pinellas County Housing Authority is not a part of the Housing Authority program. This is income qualified affordable housing. So you must have an income, Social Security, otherwise, in order to qualify in that program. The vouchers are issued through Clearwater Housing Authority and Pinellas County Housing Authority and unrelated to the project.
Okay, I just wondered because all the housing authority lists in this county are closed right now. You cannot get on them at all. You can't even apply to get on them. So when somebody's homeless or couch surfing as I am, you have no resources for it. And I don't want anything special or fancy, just an efficiency big enough for me and my cat, and to get my things out of storage. It's not a lot to ask for. The other thing I wanted to know is that property on Cleveland. I've looked at that for a while, since it's been empty. And I'm wondering why we couldn't do a tiny home complex there. Or would anyone even be interested in a tiny home complex in the city?
Well, we are actually looking at several different locations for tiny homes, correct, Joe?
We're communicating with Mike Gelazzo
Right.
right now, us and the CRA.
Mhm.
Mike Gelazzo is really the tiny home expert in the county. He's really been pushing that concept more than anyone in the county. He's got resources to do so. We've been working with him on a smaller CRA site that we have we're trying to get to a point where it's not just tiny homes, it's a village, and it's shared amenities and stuff like that. So we're working through some concepts, but yeah, that's something we're interested in doing, and we could potentially use our housing money for that,
Right.
if necessary. So it's something
Yeah.
that's on the radar.
Okay, I just wondered, because I know the city of Detroit did a special one with Cass Corridor, and Cass Corridor up there was a known prostitution and drug area. They've cleaned it up. A group of nuns came in, they bought a property, had it rezoned to where it was smaller lots, and the people who are living there are mostly students at Wayne State University. And those people, if they keep up the property, both inside and out, they're required to go through inspections internally, inside the home as well. If they keep it up for 7 years, they own that house free and clear. But they've earned the right to have it, and they're putting forth the effort because they've got that pride of ownership.
Understood.
That's something I'd love to see in Clearwater.
It is something that we are looking into. There are some challenges in our current zoning code that are being addressed through the comprehensive planning process, which Planning and Development has just kicked off. And so we hope to address some of the challenges with smaller unit homes as it relates to setback and other requirements. So that could include accessory dwelling units, i.e. like garage apartments, if you will, to also serve members of the community of lower income. So there are some things we are certainly looking at in the community development code along with these other opportunities that Chuck just described with the tiny homes. So there's some challenges that we need to work through, and we're working through them
Cool.
in order to be able to do
Glad
these
to
kinds of
hear that.
projects.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's say too, Denise and I are meeting with the county later this week or next week. And really,
Next week, yeah.
Is it next week?
Yeah.
And what we're intending to do is really to attack housing from, a county-wide perspective, and really have a county-wide approach as to how we do it. So we're all kind of doing the same things. So that'll be exciting. I'll certainly keep you posted as we step through that process.
Mr. Chairman, may I make a correction for the record?
Yes, please.
Pat, in Ms. Beckman's questions, I responded incorrectly about the case manager out of Directions for Living. Case manager is funded by Directions for Living, not out of the $235,000 general fund allocation that we make to the different agencies. We do not fund Directions for Living in that allocation. So that case manager is a funding commitment of Directions, not of the city of Clearwater. Thank you.
Now, item number 7 is for our board members, or any of the board members wish to be heard on anything. And I'll start to my right. Member Santiago. Member Kim? I have nothing. Nope. No comments from the board. In that case, our next NAHAB meeting is scheduled for January 14th at 9 a.m. here in the council chambers in the main library. The board is adjourned. Thank you. And everybody have a very merry